Good morning. Let's start with singing the servant song. Won't you let me be your servant? Let me be as Christ to you. And pray that I might have the grace to let you be my servant too. We are pilgrims on a journey. We are travelers on the road. We are here to help each other walk the mile and bear alone. Well, we are going to start a new series of stories because on Sunday starts a really important week for us here in the Christian tradition, and that's called Holy Week. We all remember that holy is a word that just means special. It means extraordinary. And so it's an extraordinary week for us because we remember the last week of Jesus' life on earth. Now, it's such a special week that most of the stories we have about Jesus come from this week. And they all start on this day called Palm Sunday. So Palm Sunday is the day in which Jesus arrives into Jerusalem. He didn't live there. He lived actually a good journey away. He came to Jerusalem because there was a Holy Week going on, the week of Passover. That was the week, and this still is true with our Jewish brothers and sisters, when they celebrate being delivered from slavery in Egypt. So they were slaves owned by Egyptians, and God took them out of slavery. And every year they remember that with a really, really important meal. They do that at Passover by having something called a Seder. Instead of eating challah on Shabbat and during the week, they eat bread that is flat. It has no yeast in it. It's called matzah. And every Passover, they have to remove all the yeast from their house, because when they were in Egypt, there was no time for the bread to rise. And so they didn't have yeast from the air to infiltrate their bread and build it up. So they remember that story every year. They act out the story of Passover by not having yeast. And there's a special meal called the Seder. And at the Seder, they have to tell the story of it. It doesn't matter how old you are. You can go to a retirement community. If you're Jewish, you have to tell the story. The youngest person in the room has to ask the oldest person in the room, why is this night different from all other nights? Why do we eat flatbread? Normally we eat challah, which is big and poofy and moist. Why do we eat bitter herbs? Why do we dip our herbs in salt water when we eat them? And the meal has answers to all those questions to remind everybody in the room that we weren't always free, that once we were slaves, and that it is God who delivered us from slavery. Jesus was going to Jerusalem because that was the place where you were supposed to celebrate Passover if you could. And so during the time of Jesus, maybe 40,000 people lived in the city of Jerusalem. But when it came time for Passover week, people came from all over the world, and that number grew to more than 400,000 people. So imagine that 10 times the normal population was there. People were sleeping in tents, they were sleeping in the street, and that's just because there was no room at the inn. That's where they were. So Jesus came, and the city was crawling, full of people, like going to a Texans game or an Astros game and staying all the way through. Everybody is leaving, and it's shoulder to shoulder, and that's how it was when Jesus came to the city. And on Palm Sunday, Jesus shows up in Jerusalem with this huge crowd, but he comes in a special way. Many people had to walk in Jerusalem. With all of those people there, there wasn't a lot of room for horses. Jesus didn't have a horse anyway. He comes, though, riding on top of a donkey. A donkey is a stubborn animal. It is strong, but it is not particularly fast, and as you probably know, it is not well known for doing what you want. Donkeys are known for doing what they want to do when they want to do it. So Jesus comes on a donkey, and he does that because a long, long time ago there was a king called David. David is the person who conquered and took Jerusalem for the Hebrew people. It used to belong to a people called the Jebusites. And David, when he took Jerusalem, came in riding on a donkey. And this is a great part of the story. Back then, people didn't know how to ride horses. They didn't know that horses breathed in through their nose. They thought horses only breathed in through their mouth, like oxen. When you put a bit in the mouth of an ox, it might very well suffocate, because oxen breathe through their mouths, not through their noses. So it took Hebrew people a long time before they figured out how to ride a horse with a saddle. They knew how to ride a chariot because, of course, you put a harness on the horse and don't put anything on its mouth. But they did not know how to put a bit in the mouth of the horse. That was discovered a long time later. It turns out that you can probably fight better on your feet than you can on a donkey. A horse is tall and strong and fast. A donkey is not particularly tall. It's not particularly fast, and it doesn't maneuver very well. It's stubborn. So when David comes in on a donkey, it's almost a sign, I've already won. The donkey did not help him. He'd already beat the city, and that's why he could come in a donkey. It would be like fighting on a pogo stick. Can you imagine trying to fight somebody on a pogo stick? You can't carry any weapons, you're concentrating all the time, and you have to jump. You can't maneuver particularly well compared to somebody on feet. If somebody comes to fight you on a pogo stick, it either means they know they're going to lose, or they're sure they've already won. Jesus comes on a donkey because he's sending the signal, hey, this fight that you seem like that you're in the middle of, it's already been won. God is not actually fighting evil. God has already won. We just have to live into the victory. So Jesus comes on a donkey, and lots of people say, look, here's this guy everybody's been waiting for, this guy who is going to take care of our problems and lead us into a new way of living. And what they do is, instead of rolling out a red carpet, because after all, they didn't have a lot of money, the people who loved Jesus, they went to the nearby trees and they pulled off whatever they could. Palm branches. It's a desert. There's palms. They got these palm branches and they waved them, which is sort of like going to a basketball game and waving one of those big foam fingers like you're number one. Or they spread them down on the ground. Some of them even took off their coats and spread them on the ground. Look, we know donkeys are dirty and their feet get dirty. It was a way of trying to roll out the red carpet and make a special entry for Jesus. What a lot of people don't know is that while Jesus was coming in on a donkey, there was a military parade the same day. The ruler, the governor of the town, did not live in Jerusalem, and he came during Holy Week, during Passover, because there were so many people. He wanted to make sure there wasn't a riot. But he did not come on a donkey. He came on a war horse. There were elephants possibly in the procession. There were chariots. Soldiers all marched in unison. Imagine Jesus on a pogo stick and the Roman army coming in tanks. There is no battle between a pogo stick and tanks, and that's what was happening on Palm Sunday. The leader, the governor, his name was Pontius Pilate, came in showing all the strength of the army, and Jesus came in riding on a donkey. It's a reminder to us that sometimes it takes more, it's a reminder to us that being strong and showing off weapons and showing off in general, well, they might have an effect, but they're not the way that God chooses to come. And it's a great reminder for us that it doesn't always build friendships that are meaningful or helpful. Sometimes we're tempted to make people afraid of us, to show off how bad we can be and how good we can be. But the message of Palm Sunday is that Jesus comes in humility. Who would you rather be friends with? Somebody who is always showing off, or somebody who comes riding in on a pogo stick because that's who they are? In this way, Jesus is showing us and reminding us at the very beginning of Holy Week that we always have choices before us in how we try to be friends with each other and the ways in which we welcome each other. Do we need red carpets, or will palms do? Do we need to go and buy things or be inordinately fancy? Do we need to be afraid of each other? Or can we welcome each other literally with our palms? When one of our classmates does something well, can we say, good job, or do we need to try to do better? When one of our classmates comes in on a pogo stick, can we be interested and happy for them instead of having to get longer stilts ourselves? This is a great opportunity for us to think about how it is we make an entrance, how we invite people, how we welcome them. And this is the start of Palm Sunday. I'll get to tell you more about Palm Sunday because there's another really important thing that happens tomorrow. But for today, it's about a procession. And I encourage you, whether you're at home or you're talking to people on the computer, this is a great way to remember to be yourself. To be yourself and welcome others with what you have, instead of going out of your way to try to be somebody that you are not, or to welcome others with something you do not have. So let's sing one more verse of the servant song. I will hold the Christ light for you in the night time of your